Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another week of the Let's Talk Social Innovation podcast. I hope you've had an amazing start to your week, but if not, we can kickstart that right here. I'm your host, Ian Kahinde, and this week on, y'all, I have the incredible Dr. Ian Nettleship. But before we get into that, I have to go through the bulletin board. So for this week's bulletin board, October 9th, join the David C. Frederick Honors College for a fun-filled night of trivia, snacks, and prizes. You can grab some friends, bring them over, or go solo, and we'll place you on a team. There will be different categories across pop culture, sports, history, and facts about Pitt. There will be prizes like FHC merch, bags, scarves, and many more things. Register now for a fun night out. And as always, the link will be in the description and there will be something on the screen for you to click. Secondly, envisioning a Just Pittsburgh, the deadline is coming up for the second call for submissions. As we've been talking about the last few weeks, there is prize money and there is certain criteria for the art being submitted. And as I have been stressing, it would be a disservice to not share your gift with the community and be rewarded for it. So check out the link in the description, check out the criteria, and see if it's something that you are interested in applying for. Thirdly, as always in the link tree, we have our nominations link. If you would like to be a guest on this podcast, or you know someone in your life that is doing incredible things that you think should be featured on this podcast, fill out the nominations link either for you or on their behalf, and we will reach out to them and hopefully they can be on the show. And lastly, I am a senior here at the University of Pittsburgh. We are looking for a successor to take over this podcast next year. We are looking to hire an intern to learn the ropes. It is a paid position and take over the podcast when I'm out of here. So if you're interested, in the link tree in the description, you'll be able to find an interest form and we'll reach back out to you and get that ball rolling. But anyways, y'all, everything else aside, Dr. Ian Nettleship, how are we feeling today?
Very good, thank you. Happy to be here.
So in this week's episode, we'll be going through Dr. Nettleship's backstory, his history of engineering. We'll talk about humanitarian engineering as a whole. Then we'll have our artist spotlight. And in the second half, we'll be talking about the intersections between chance, equity, and engineering. But everything else aside, Dr. Nettleship, take me from the beginning.
Okay, thank you very much, Ian. Yeah, you're probably aware from my accent, I'm originally English. And I grew up in the South Derbyshire coalfields in northern England, and my father was a mine worker, and my mom, she was the daughter of a farm laborer. And so, yeah, I kind of grew up in the countryside, in the coal fields, and then I got the opportunity to go to university. And I went to the University of Leeds and did engineering, in particular material science and engineering as an undergraduate degree, and then did my PhD in ceramics, and then came to the States, and the first stop was University of California, Santa Barbara, which was fantastic, and that's where I met my wife, Paula, and then after almost 2 years, went to the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign, where I did more research as a postdoc. And then finally, after a couple of years, I got a real job here at the University of Pittsburgh on tenure track position. And so, yeah, I spent all my time doing research and teaching. And about a year or so after we arrived, our first child arrived, which is Robert, but at the time he was born, he was 10 weeks early, and he was only 1 pound, 14 ounces, and he wasn't breathing when he was born, and so that was a quite traumatic experience, both for us and the family, and I really didn't get a lot of opportunity to reflect on that until after I'd been through tenure and things like that. And I started to think, well, you know what, if I'd have been born in many places, if my son had been born in many places in the world, he would have died in childbirth. And not only that, but my wife would have bled to death. And my daughter would have never been conceived. So I think at that time I came to the realization that, well, yes, research is important, teaching is very important also, but I needed to do something a little bit more. Something a little bit more than that for folks who live without human dignity. And, you know, not many of those folks show up at university. Yeah. So you have to think about how you can do things that would serve their interests. And about that time, I found the low-cost ceramic water filter. And there was a faculty member at Slippery Rock University who was involved in it. And so I kind of got involved with that, learned about it, and through that, learned a lot about appropriate technologies and about how to work in marginalized communities as an engineer and what the opportunities are. And so I've been doing that now for 15 years or so, and I'm now the president of a small non-for-profit ceramic water filter solutions, which gives us the direct contact with marginalized communities that I think if you work in universities and you're looking at appropriate technologies that are for marginalized communities, then it's a really good idea to be involved with organizations that do actually implement these technologies on the ground. And so I've been doing that now for a while. I'm president of Ceramic Water Filter Solutions, and what we do is we establish small-scale factories in marginalized communities to make the low-cost ceramic water filter. It takes bacteria and parasites out of water, drinking water. And, 780 million people lack access to safe, clean water. Mm-hmm. And the unfortunate result of that is that about 460,000 children under 5 years old die every year, simply of treatable diarrheal illness. And it still shocks me even now that in the 21st century that still happens. So the nice thing about working with ceramic water filter solutions is that, well, the ceramic water filter itself we make from local materials that we find in the communities, and in particular for the water filter it's clay and sawdust. And we mix that with water and we press it into something that looks like a plant pot with a big rim on it, and that's the filter element, and that sits on top of a 5-gallon bucket. And when you pour water in the top, it filters through into the bottom of the bucket, and there's a tap there to dispense the water. That's how the thing works. But the thing is, if you just use the local clay, the pores between the clay particles can let the water through, and they remove the bacteria and the parasites. They don't let those through. But unfortunately, if you just use a clay, the flow rate's not high enough at all to serve a family of 4 for a day. So what we do is we also add sawdust to the formulation. And during the firing of the filter, that burns out and creates pores that improve the flow rate through the filter. So when we're in the field, we're trying to perform this balancing act of optimizing with local materials the filter that is still efficacious, still takes out the bacteria and the pathogens, but also has enough flow rate to work. So when we're doing that in the field, there's often not enough time to think about all the other questions that come up when you're doing this. And so those what if questions can come back to the ceramic filter project here at Pitt, and they become student projects so that the students can learn a little bit about waterborne diseases in marginalized communities, and they can learn about a technology that has been proven to work, and they can also answer a question that ceramic water filter solutions would not be able to answer by themselves.
So, as president of Ceramic Water Filter Solutions, how much do you travel?
Me, it's not much, basically, because I have to teach, right? So I can't do the field work directly myself. The reason is because many of the places where these are implemented, the summer is a really bad time to be in these places. Many of the places, you know, summer's a bad time of year for dengue or chikungunya or malaria and things like that. And so that means the work has to be done kind of in the winter months. And I'm here teaching, so I can't go. So right now we have some really good field workers who, one in particular was, I think, the best I've ever seen. And so they're the ones that are working in the field, yeah.
So what made you want to select humanitarian engineering and engineering these products at the base level of operation as opposed to taking a more global approach?
Yeah. This is what I learned from being involved with Engineers Without Borders USA. You know, I've been the faculty advisor for about 17 years or so. But about 20 years ago, that organization was started to do small-scale engineering projects in marginalized communities around the world. And the reason why the projects have to be small-scale is because of the entrance requirements. Well, if you're going to do a large-scale engineering project, that requires a lot of money, a lot of financial resources, which really means that you don't get to actually do anything. Mm-hmm. So if you keep things small-scale, if you focus on projects that cost $50,000 or less, that lowers the barrier to entrance. And so for engineering professionals, this is how they can make the most immediate impact, is to learn how to do small-scale projects, to learn how to do them in marginalized communities, and have that kind of direct impact on people's lives.
So backtracking a little bit, going back to your family upbringing, when did you know that engineering was right for you?
Yes, I didn't, not to begin with, because I was about 15 and 16 when I even considered going to university. You know, I hadn't really considered doing what I was going to do with my life until that point. My mom and my dad had always encouraged me to do as much, to go as far as I could with my education. And so I kind of concentrated on that. And it was really the vice principal of the school who, he told me that, I could go to university if I wanted to, and he showed me the forms I'd have to take home to have my parents fill in and things like that. And so that's what got me on track to go into university, because, I'm the first of my family to go there. For them in particular, my mom and dad, this was never a possibility. So I really didn't know very much about it, but I saw it as an opportunity I wanted to take, and the reason I chose engineering is because I could get a job. That was my main criteria, because I really needed to make sure that if I'm going to do this, then I have to be able to make a living. And that would get me out of having to work down a mine and stuff like that. So that was the main reason. And I picked material science and engineering because it was the one with lowest entry requirements, because I needed to make sure that I picked something where I was going to be able to get in, to be quite frank. Yeah.
So, hold on. I just lost my train of thought. Okay. So, being a first generation college student, did you ever have to face imposter syndrome? And do you still struggle with that to this day?
I did. Back then, I don't think that we really understood what that was. But it always troubled me that, many of the kids who were at school who were much smarter than me, to be quite frank, didn't go to university. And so, yeah, I got there, very happy to be there and to have that opportunity, but in the back of my mind thinking, well, should I really be here? Is this, why me? And so I kind of understand what that imposter syndrome is. Over the years, I think I've got used to it, but it never quite goes away completely. You're always worried that, well, I'm going to wake up someday and this was just a big dream, It wasn't. So there is that fear, I think, irrational fear of having, slipping back to into that situation or failing in some way, Yeah. But I think I've got used to it. Yeah.
Now, there's no smooth segue into this question, but how did you meet your wife?
Oh, yeah, that was interesting. This is another facet of what I did when I was at university. I fenced, the sport fencing, and I did that for a few years before I went to university, and the reason I chose it was because I had the opportunity, and it was a minority sport. That meant that, again, playing the odds, I had a decent chance of getting into teams and doing performing well enough. And
So you're a lowest common denominator guy.
That's me. Yeah, I really am, and it worked. So I got in to a university team, and I spent 6 years playing fencing for the University of Leeds. There's no NCAA rules about how long you're allowed to do it.
And poking people.
That's right. You can do it for as long as you can. And then the nice thing about it is they did pay for equipment because it is expensive. But I really enjoyed that, and so I fenced competitively for 10 years. And the reason why this is important was because I found the fencing club when I went to University of California, Santa Barbara, and my wife, who was a little younger than me, she was an undergrad at the time, and she went to the fencing club, and that's where we met.
It's very cute.
Yeah, it is.
So, comparing and contrasting your family upbringing with the family that you've created, what is it like having the difference of opportunity with the lower class that you came from and what you're able to provide for your family now?
There is a significant difference. When we first came to Pittsburgh, before we had our kids, we intentionally moved into a municipality with a great school system. And both of us wanted our kids to have the opportunities to do what they could with their education. So In this municipality where we live, a lot of kids go to university or college or go on to do something of their choice, really. And so I think for our kids, it just was second nature that they were going to get that choice and do something that they wanted to do.
So, what advice could you pass on to any young prospective engineers who want to get to where you're at now?
Yeah, I think in terms of work in marginalized communities, it sounds like it's hard. It is hard to do, but it sounds like it's hard to find somewhere to get involved. And I think that's unfortunate because, especially these days, there are plenty of opportunities. I think when you first think about this, you think, well, I really want to do something that does good, not just me doing well, but I also don't feel like I have the skill set, have no experience of doing any of this. But that's where I think Engineers Without Borders USA has done a great job, because they concentrate on small projects. It means that nearly every university that has an engineering school in the US has a chapter. The most major cities have chapters. And again, because they're small scale, low financial barriers, it means that small groups of people can get together and do something important halfway around the world. And so my advice is, don't feel like you shouldn't do it because you don't know anything. Just go there, get involved in something that sounds good to you, and more than likely they'll be elated to see a young person walk through who's interested in doing it and getting involved. And the other thing is, just stick with it. Don't give up. Don't drift away. Just make sure that there's enough fire in the belly to keep you going, and understanding that, well, your involvement is going to wax and wane. There may be periods of your life where this is a job. There may be other periods of life where it's, like with me, it's kind of a spare time occupation, really. I mean, it infuses everything else I do, but it's still, it's not what I'm paid to do necessarily. And so be comfortable with that and just learn what you need to learn. And join an organization that's going to teach you that, and keep being involved. Don't drift away.
So last thing that we'll touch on before we hit this week's Artist Spotlight, disconnecting from engineering throughout your personal and professional life. What's the greatest life lesson that you've learned?
I think it's to really think carefully about what you want to do. And I think when I grew up, I was just looking for, where's the opportunities, which is the one that I'm most likely to be able to get in, and that's how I thought about it. But I think with a topic like this, it's important that young people, young professionals, not just engineers, feel that agency, that they can be involved. And so I learned that later in life, so I was able to kind of steer my professional career towards it and to include it, and I feel really fortunate in doing that. But the main lesson that I've learned is to pick something that you think is worthwhile and just keep doing it. Don't give up.
I appreciate the insight.
Yeah.
Now, getting into this week's Artist Spotlight, we'll be playing the song New Jersey by Adam's Purse. I hope y'all enjoy. y'all enjoyed this week's Artist Spotlight, New Jersey by Adam's Purse. As always, the artist page will be in the description of the episode, wherever you're watching or listening online. Now, getting into this week's topic, we have a new theme for the month of October, which is Power in Academia, where we have on incredible guests who are enamored in the field of academia and do academic work. And we show where social innovation comes into play through academia. This week's topic will be the intersections of chance, equity, and engineering. Now, my experience with chance, equity, and engineering is that everything in life is truly up to luck. You never asked to be born to who you were born to. And every single decision and every single thing that happens in your life from that point comes from the fact of where you were born and when you were born, which really means that even if you had autonomy in the decisions that you've made, the only reason that you were in that position to make said decisions was because of the chance, because of the luck of where you ended up. So where equity and engineering come into play with that is truly about leveling the playing field so that we don't have to worry about where we were born or who we were born to. So that's my introduction. I'll be leaving the floor open to Dr. Nettleship for the rest.
Okay, so yeah, from my background, I talked about it before, but there was a lot of chance. There was a lot of things that I didn't really understand about, like going to college, for instance. That I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't even know I could go to college until, the vice principal for the school told me I could when I was 15 or 16. So I never grew up with that expectation. And it was only through him that I even considered doing it. He, at the time in England, where I grew up, to apply for college, you had to fill in some forms to apply to a clearinghouse, and so he gave me those forms and told me to take them home to my parents and have them fill them in and then mail them back. So I think without that chance, I probably would never have thought about it. I would never have thought about going to college. So, it's the other thing is for me, when I chose the topic area that I chose, it was because, I didn't know whether I would be able to get the kind of exam scores I needed to get into engineering school. So I chose the one that was, had some of the lowest entrance requirements. And it was also a good mixture of chemistry, physics, and math in material science and engineering. So, I'm quite well aware of how chance has played a role, and especially for folks who may not have the same opportunities. People grow up with expectations of being able to do stuff and go to college and things like that. In other areas, people don't. They don't have that same expectation. And without expectation, it means more than likely they will not do that. So it certainly chance plays a greater role if you don't grow up with the expectation of being able to do certain things. Yeah.
So then with you dedicating your career to equity, how does that play into chance?
Yeah. In terms of, I don't know if I've dedicated my career to equity necessarily. It's something that I began to think about once my son was born, and because of the circumstances of his birth and the fact that there are many places around the world where the circumstances of his birth would have meant that he would have died, and my wife would have died, my daughter would have never been conceived. So as a consequence of that, that's what started to get me involved. So in this case, it wasn't a piece of good luck, it was a piece of bad luck, but it's that trauma that really meant that I was now looking for something that had more meaning. Research does have meaning, especially if you're interested in doing it and you kind of, your basic character is well adapted to it, and of course teaching as well, that was very important, but it just wasn't by themselves enough. There needed to be more. I really didn't see how this impacted people that were marginalized. So I think until that time, I hadn't really thought that much about equity, in terms of the chances that I got. But certainly by then, it began to make a great deal of difference. And of course, in humanitarian engineering these days, we kind of understand the role of human rights and life with human dignity, and how this needs to be part of the process of deciding in communities what you're going to do and how many people in those communities are going to be affected and why. So we have now built-in processes to the way that humanitarian engineering is done to take into consideration that, well, in most communities even, things are not equitable necessarily, that there's always subpopulations that for one reason or another are even more marginalized. So it's not just going to work in a marginalized community, and very often that's the case. Say they're indigenous people that were driven up into the hills during colonial times, and that's where they reside now. And or it could also be that there are sectors of society that are marginalized, even within those communities. So it's very important that when you're doing humanitarian engineering projects that must last and stand the test of time, that equity and its role in life with human dignity should be important considerations at the beginning of the project, and should influence what you do and who you do it for.
One of my favorite quotes or sayings is that a rising tide raises all ships. I like to think that increasing equity is like that rising tide, where I worry less about the chances of me being born on the other side of the world, knowing that I could still live a life where my human needs are being met. So transitioning into the last pillar of this conversation, how does engineering connect chance and equity?
Well, I think engineering has an underappreciated role in addressing unmet basic human needs, and I think that's what humanitarian engineering has really been about over the last 20 years. So because we have now a toolbox, we have our appropriate technologies, we have our project frameworks which guides how we do projects and how we make decisions. These mean that now we have the ability to actually work in marginalized communities more effectively as small groups. So I think it's because we have the toolbox for addressing unmet basic human need that this now allows us to play a role in terms of the application of engineering in society, that it's not just as it's been in the past, in that engineering is really not just a technical subject, it's a socio-technical subject. And that means that, engineers commonly work for people who are already quite well off. And so we now have a range of highly sophisticated technical solutions, and we live in this kind of engineered world, this kind of engineered bubble. And people in marginalized communities don't get to have life in these circumstances. So it's really important that humanitarian engineering does grow and address issues in marginalized communities when they get left behind. So hopefully it's not just engineering providing more services for people that are already rich relatively, and focusing more on the needs of marginalized people, and the way that we do that is focusing on unmet basic human need.
So I believe that some can make the argument that engineering at its most basic level is inequitable, and in a social context can even be an enemy of progress. What would your rebuttal to that be?
Well, yeah, again, engineering and its solutions goes to the people who can pay for it, and not to the people who don't. And that kind of colors the kind of topics that engineers work on. Of course, they still do fantastic work even here in our kind of first world society. They're still heavily involved in solving problems. But the thing is that engineering becomes, when we do that, more and more compartmentalized. So that, if you're a new engineer coming into the subject, then your focus might be quite narrow in terms of a specific technical job. And that's because you're surrounded by this quite complex system of people and technologies that allow you to use that very refined skill set. The problem with that, of course, is that, when you're looking at marginalized communities around the world, they don't participate in the society, so these solutions don't speak to their problems. And engineers, because of their specializations, are now not very well adapted to these broader problems that people in marginalized communities have. So I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, this is why humanitarian engineering has to grow, because of its focus on human rights approach to development, small-scale projects that remove the financial barriers to implementation, and very simple technologies, appropriate technologies, frugally engineered technologies that create products and services that penetrate into those low-income markets. So I understand what you're saying, but at the same time, humanitarian engineering is growing around the world. It's something that you can find in most engineering schools these days.
So with this technical specialization of engineering, I guess there's two ways to really combat it. It's either an increase in cooperation across disciplines or an increase in base level education of basic engineering principles. Which way do you think that should shift?
I think towards the second. I think we have to move away from this over-reliance on decontextualized problem solving. That produces students with very good technical skills, but it's not so good at this broader knowledge that's required to serve a variety of different peoples at the different stages of development. And certainly the very compartmentalized approach to engineering is not so good because, again, the requirement to have a very specific and highly specialized set of skills works in these very complex systems in which we generate our technologies and engineering services for highly developed societies. But that same structure, that same complex system of people and technologies isn't well adapted to circumstances for marginalized people because the cost of this very complex system is huge. So you have to be working on things that are very, very expensive. Whereas humanitarian engineering is at the other end of the scale, where you're working with very simple technologies to keep the costs down so that you can actually implement. And so I think at least some parts of engineering, that education has to be broadened. So to have a broader context, not just for engineering for humanity, but also for the grand challenges that we have in sustainable development.
So if there was any way you could summarize and close out this topic of the intersections of chance, equity, and engineering, how would you do that?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I think the focus should be, again, on creating engineering that is education that is broader, that understands the role that equity and human rights play in the world that we have and the drivers of things like poverty and things like that on a global scale. And so, for me at least, the challenge in engineering education is to bring that breadth into the subject. It might be difficult if the drivers are going in the opposite direction. Mm-hmm. But nonetheless, I think if there's at least some emphasis for empowering students to work with appropriate technologies or small-scale engineering projects, then this could be a great context for broadening the kind of education of of engineers so that they understand the bigger challenges that are out there and not just the specific technical challenges associated with some technology. So I think that engineering could play a great role in developing more equitable approaches to providing engineering services.
ABET, make sure you take notes. That's all I can say.
Yes, that's right. The criteria, it's written into the ABET criteria. And I think humanitarian engineering would be a great context in which to more fully address these things so that it's not just something in your senior design project. Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to get across to our audience?
No, except one thing, and that is it doesn't matter whether you're an engineer or not. As long as you're a young professional, there's something that you can do to serve marginalized people, and you just have to find the organizations and the people around you so that you can learn what you need to learn to be empowered to serve them. You're not going to get that by just sitting around and thinking about it. You actually have to go out and get involved and do it. And by doing that, you will, and not giving up, you will be able to make that impact that you want to make.
That's a beautiful way to end things off. I very much appreciate your time and coming on to this podcast. For everybody watching and listening, all things Engineers Without Borders, all things ceramic water filter solutions will be in the description below. But anyways, y'all, this is your host, Ian Kahinde. I hope you have an amazing rest of your week, and we are signing off. Peace out, everybody.
Bye-bye. Thank you.